So we were brought in by the river warden and river steward for the River Wye in order to look at areas of the river that have had heavy amounts of erosion, and so we were contacted by the council to look at the erosion on the river in these sections and advise on designs for restoring the bank and reducing the erosion long term. We've then been brought in as the contractor as well to undertake the works long term. Part of the role that we took was to design the works, which was to undertake feasibility studies for different types of restoration of the banks, taking into account the ecology of the local area, the ecology directly within the area of the works to be undertaken, then doing a full design process on it and applying for the permits from the Environment Agency for works then to be delivered. So the first step, we've already undertaken the design brief on it, which was to design a full catalogue of works, including materials, length of extent of the works needing to be done, and applying for the permit for that from the Environment Agency. The Environment Agency have now granted the permit, and so the initial works to be undertaken on the site will be to begin the process of recreating the bank line, which is to take the bank line out to where it previously was, so that there's a new toe line for the bank that can then be infilled with gravel and site-worn material to basically form a buffer between the river and the eroded bank line. So we're looking for the delivery of works to take around 6 weeks, and the design process plus the application for the permit took approximately 12 months in the end, mainly due to the delays with various aspects of the permit application. So yeah. So this section used to have a hard engineered toe, and the hard engineered toe has failed due to undercutting, and due to that the bank has then started to erode behind it, and the main cause of that is the pinch point of the river at the bridge, meaning that when they have a high flow of water, it then forces the water out within the channel, and that's begun to undercut. So the risk of allowing it to continue to undercut is it may start then to impact the footings of the bridge. So restoring the bank at this point is important for that. So on this section we will find the exact line of where the original hard engineering was, find a base for that, so that may be to use the original base of the hard engineering or to remove that base and then create a completely new base using the materials that we'll be using. In order, that point that then protects the bank line, and then we will fill that with more gravel and soil as opposed to just the soil that's behind it at the moment, and that should reduce the amount of erosion and scour on this section. This section will sit in the same time period as section 1, so we create the bank line for all the sections at point 1 and then backfill all at the same time as well. So this will run after area 1, we'll move on to area 2 with the bank line, and then on to area 3 with the bank line, and then we'll start again at area 1 with the backfill, and then we'll work from there. One of the main things we have to be aware of is fish and fish spawning. Crayfish, white-coloured crayfish, are a protected species, so we have to be aware of whether or not they're here. Water voles, and then other species that may be used in the water, like wildfowl, birds, invertebrates, other mammals on the bank side, and they all have to be factored into ecological reports for the works to make sure that our works aren't impacting them. The same as you would with any development, really. To have an ecological appraisal done on the works that are to be undertaken, which includes kind of the habitat, vegetation structure, and then the species in the local area. This is area 3 on the restoration plan, and the biggest impact for this area has been people and dogs entering the river. So they get a lot of footfall on this section, and this is where a lot of people enter the river for a paddle or the dogs go in. And they also have a heavy impact with wildfowl from geese and other birds like ducks and things, because of people feed them on the bankside in the centre of Bakewell, and so there's a heavy footfall on here that's caused a massive amount of scour power and erosion on the bank on this section. Nature won't necessarily be a problem. One of the key things we'll have to do is we've got to try and re-establish the vegetation on it, which means that we had to put in a plan that allow for the establishment of vegetation under grazing pressure from wildfowl. We also obviously had to consider the fact that a lot of people are probably still going to want to use it to enter into the river, so we've had to kind of extrally protect where we're putting stone and stuff in order to mean that as soon as we finish the works and the seed is put down, people walking on it isn't going to impact the vegetation re-establishing on. On this section we'll be creating the bank toe where original hard engineered toe was before. It's about 1.5 metres out from current bank line, and in order to do that we'll be removing some of the rock and using that in order to be able to protect the toe long term, then installing brushwood and coir rolls as the new bank line, and then filling with graded stone, which is a mix of 20mm up to 50mm stone, and then that will be topped with topsoil and seeded with a wetland bankside mix, which has species inside it that are resilient to being flooded out during certain periods of time, but also are drought resistant, so you can have that if you don't have a lot of rainfall. So far we've undertaken stage 1 of the restoration works, which is to install coir rolls and brushwood. Coir rolls are made of coconut fibre, and they're installed as a new bank face and toe, ready for being backfilled at a later date. And the coir breaks down over a period of time, allowing vegetation to establish on the bank side. Coconut fibre is the husks of coconut, so it's taken off of the outside of the coconut when they break them down, put through a fibre machine that then breaks it into shorter material that then is put into effectively a pressure machine that presses it into the logs that you can see, and then that's forced into a net, and then once it's forced into the net it then is tied off, and that's what creates the log. The idea behind that is that it's a tough material, so it has a 5 to 10 year lifespan before it fully degrades away, but it also, because of the roughness of the material, it allows for vegetation and roots and things to establish on the material. So this material we're aiming to be around for about 5 years, because the vegetation that we're planning to put on the site should bind into the material within that 5-year period, and therefore it should have allowed it to be able to rot down in that period. So the next step for stage 2 for all area 1, area 2 and area 3 is to backfill the bank side. So we'll be doing that with initially 30 to 50mm gabion stone on the bottom, and then a 20 to 10mm gravel goes on the top, and then topsoil goes on top of that before it's then seeded and coir matting put over the top. Yeah, so we're putting a marginal seed mix and a meadow seed mix mixed up, basically to allow for inundation that won't kill the species during the winter period, and then during the summer period it will grow up like the meadow within Scots garden surrounding. So the restoration works will be completed within the next 2 weeks, so the backfill won't take very long at all, and we are now completed with the bank face. So yeah, so we'd anticipate probably 2 more weeks before the main restoration works are done, and then coming into kind of the end of summer, we should start to see germination of the seeds that are down, so vegetation should start to establish before winter. Initially, for a river like the one that runs through Bakewell, it's quite rocky underneath, so what we do initially is we put in a rock spike using a hand post knocker, which creates a pilot hole for the stakes. We then hammer in the front face stakes, which are the leading face that's on the riverside. That's run in with the posts at every metre. That then allows you to be able to install brushwood bundles, which are 2 metre long hazel bundles. They're installed as a base layer on the bed of the river, and then the coir goes on the top On various different types, we try to look at standard summer levels where the coir roll is about 25% above standard summer levels. We obviously have a much lower level at the moment due to the drier spell, so we've kind of had to factor that in with where we've positioned the coir, so the coir sits at about where the current water level is, allowing a bit of change in the water level before it gets inundated. And then that is then staked at the back, again roughly 1 to 2 metres, a stake's point at the back, and then it's tied off using jute tie rope. One of the key things, we have seen quite an increase in smaller fish around where the brushwood bundles are, because obviously the flow changes down inside that section, so it's a bit more sheltered for them inside there. There's a heavy reduction in silt already on the very edge of the new bank face, because obviously the silt's been filtered out by the brushwood, so that's building up inside the brushwood as it's supposed to, and then the gravels are cleaner. We have had a lot of the wildfowl and stuff have been around while we've been doing the works, which hasn't been a major problem, but they do like to kind of fish around where you are. So, but yeah, other than that, it's been, we've not really seen much else at the moment, because obviously we are causing disturbance at the minute with us doing the works, but yeah. So we would anticipate that it would have grassed up and vegetation to have grown by the winter, and therefore then it will look as kind of as the standard banking by kind of next summer, once it's all settled in. So yeah, it's fairly quick on establishing itself. One of the biggest things for environmental land management solutions is a lot of these works can be focused by local groups and the people that fund it as aesthetically pleasing. It's about aesthetics. For us as a company, our ethos is having the aesthetics but it being beneficial for wildlife and nature as well. So we always try to use natural materials, and where possible all the natural materials are installed with nature initially in mind, and then installed as aesthetically as we can for local residents to see it as being pleasing, but where the benefit is majoritively for nature in the first place. So with Let Hook, we've completed the works on the bank revetment, so we've installed the coir roll, the brushwood, and installed coir matting on the top, and it's been reseeded, and it's also its backfill done, so the banks are now restored back to the width we want them to be, and now it's just down to nature taking its course in re-establishing them. So in total it's taken around 3.5 weeks to go from the start when we mobilised to the very end. We had some logistics with sorting out materials, because the materials all had to be delivered in ton bags, and because of that and the limited space that we had, they had to be delivered in phases. So we had a few periods of time inside it where we weren't able to continue doing the works just because we were waiting on materials to be delivered. So the one main obvious specific section of this is the weir behind me that had failed, and so therefore that was causing a heavy amount of erosion on the bank that we've restored just because of where the failure point is. But obviously another main difference with this section is this is the main floodplain section. So it runs through the centre of, obviously in the centre of Bakewell, but once it goes downstream of the bridge, the Bakewell comes right into the river, so it's got hard engineering all the way down each side of it, whereas up here the water's allowed to get out into the floodplain during flood level rainfall, and so therefore that changes the way in which the erosion is, because the erosion's both top and bottom, so it scours out during normal periods of flow, and then during high flow we get a high level scour if there's barefaced areas of the bank. One of the key aspects is when we do the works and we get the works permitted by the Environment Agency, is we must make sure that the works that we're doing don't increase flood risk. So obviously the importance for the Environment Agency is making sure there's no increased flood risk for properties. So when we come, and obviously we want to kind of expand the bank a little in order to be able to get the best solution for the area, but that must also not decrease the capacity of the channel significantly, so that there's not a increase in the flood risk in the area. So that's very important for the properties. In terms of kind of the wildlife and the natural environment of it, it's trying to restore it back to being kind of natural with the river, that the natural features of the river are kept in place, that gravels are greatly improved because they can slow the flow of water and stuff, and increase the flood resilience of the area. This is coir matting, so the purpose of it is to lay over where we've got bare ground, so we seed underneath it with a suitable mix, and then the coir mat's put over the top, and it means if we get heavy rainfall, so the river comes up, or we get runoff rainfall over the ground, it doesn't wash away and scour the freshly installed material. But obviously until the seed establishes and the vegetation establishes in it, that's not bound together, so we need to give it just a bit of additional protection, and that's what the coir matting is there for. This is the downstream section of the works, which is just downstream of the main bridge. So the reason this one's different is that we have the bottleneck for the bridge, so the water levels are lower here and the power of the water is lower. We also have a heavy amount of dog and waterfowl erosion issues down on this section, just because the majority of people feed the birds down in this section, so they're all congregated down here, and kind of when they see people wandering on this side of the bank, they all come over here and try to climb out of the bank, so they add a lot of scour from that and from dogs inside this area compared to upstream where there's not as many birds that get in and out of the river. So the same works has been done, the coir and brushwood fascia on it, and then it's been backfilled with stone, soil over the top of that, seeded, and then coir matting put on top of that. So the exact same process, just along here it's been installed slightly wider, so we've installed slightly more, reinstated slightly more banking than we did upstream. It's obviously for slightly different types of erosion, so this isn't kind of, it's more a scour erosion due to footfall rather than it being the power of the water that's causing the erosion. And so therefore we've kind of been able to put a higher density of seed as well down inside this section to get a quicker stabilisation of the banking, so that when people walk over it, it's not going to cause much damage to the new instated bank. So this is a marginal mixed seed, so we use 80% grass because that gives the binding, and then 20% marginal wetland wildflower that then allows it to be able to establish. So the idea is that the grass establishes as the binder, and then we just get some flowers inside there, wildflowers inside there for kind of aesthetic reasons more than anything. So in terms of our works, for our involvement, we're now in a maintenance and check period, so we'll now check it just before high flow events. So when we've got heavy rainfall or forecast, we'll come down and check it, and then we'll check it directly after as well, in order to make sure that everything stays in place until the vegetation establishes. As we looked earlier, the vegetation is establishing quite well inside it already. The kind of seeds are starting to germinate and things, so we don't expect that it'll be long before the vegetation goes up. We'll then keep an eye on that, and then at a certain point of the establishment of vegetation, we'll hand that back over to the council for them to be able to start a general maintenance project, so that'll include cutting the grass and stuff. But obviously we like to be kind of in control of the initial stages until the grass gets to a certain height, so then any works that they do with mowers or trimmers or anything doesn't damage the overall works. In a year's time we'd expect all the vegetation to have established on it. The bank is then fully protected, so there should be no bare earth. The coir should be completely covered with vegetation to a certain height, and it should then look entirely natural. It should just look like a natural bank again, rather than a scoured bank. I think, to be honest, in comparison to other works, I think I've quite enjoyed the engagement from the members of the public. They've engaged with the signs that we put up, and then when they've had additional questions, they've approached us in a friendly manner, and yeah, really got engaged with the works that we're doing and asked really good questions, and we've had very good feedback from it. I think it's going to be, certainly from the works that we've done, I think it could be a great place for biodiversity, environmental improvement and reducing the flood risks for Bakewell. I think it's going to be a great place for local residents, and for me it's a place that I'm going to be able to come back to both professionally and personally and look at it establishing, and from a professional point of view being able to look and go, that's the work that we did, and yeah, that would be great for the community.